You're lying in the soft dust of time now. Thousands of years ago, the hot sun of the Nile Valley warms your skin as the wind stirs gently through reed roofs and linen curtains. The noise of the river, oars dipping, children laughing, oxen grunting, fades into a steady hum. You are not a pharaoh, nor a scribe, nor a soldier. You're something far more ordinary, a middle-aged Egyptian man, mildly worried that the gods might be punishing you through your thinning hairline. Hair loss, you see, was no small matter in ancient Egypt. While we tend to imagine these desert-dwelling people with bald heads and golden headdresses, the truth is a little more itchy. Egyptians of the Old and Middle Kingdoms cared deeply about appearance. Cleanliness, symmetry, and a polished look were not just fashion, they were moral duties. A bald spot was not simply cosmetic. It could signal decay, age, or worse, divine disfavor. To combat this creeping crisis, many Egyptians, both elite and common, turned to the scrolls of remedies written by temple physicians and herbalists. Among these, the Ebers Papyrus, a 110-page scroll dating to around 1550 BCE, lists several curious suggestions for restoring a healthy scalp. One of the more popular treatments involved a curious blend, a poultice made of boiled porcupine hair, crushed date stones, and, yes, onion juice. These would be mixed with oil, possibly castor or moringa, and applied generously to the affected area, while reciting prayers to Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of healing. The logic was not merely medicinal, but spiritual. Hair was seen as a symbol of life force, and anything that threatened it had to be countered with both science and sorcery. You might picture a small household courtyard where a man sits cross-legged while his wife dutifully smears a sticky mixture onto his scalp. The smell, pungent, spicy, earthy, fills the air. In the background, their children play with tiny clay animals, and the family goat eyes the mixture suspiciously. Barbers, too, were central to the story of hair in Egypt. Not just groomers, they were spiritual protectors. Visiting a barber was akin to visiting a priest, particularly when hair loss was involved. The barber would not only shave heads but inspect the scalp, suggest treatments, and even perform minor rituals meant to appease the gods and chase away the demon winds thought to cause premature balding. In wealthier homes, hairpieces became fashionable. Human hair, sheep's wool, or vegetable fibers would be woven into elaborate wigs. These weren't just aesthetic additions, but symbols of wealth and status. To be bald without a wig was shameful. To be bald with a wig crafted from imported Nubian hair, that was sophistication. Interestingly, children were often bald by design. Boys and girls alike were shaved, except for a single lock of hair, the side lock of youth, which was left to grow long and styled ceremoniously. This was practical, less lice, and symbolic, a mark of youth and purity. But when adults began to show involuntary thinning, the tone changed. Remedies were pursued, oils massaged, and wigs adjusted carefully to mask nature's betrayal. The elite even had access to temples that specialized in health and beauty. Priests might bless a treatment, or recommend changes in diet, more fish, fewer figs. Some scrolls advised applying animal fats from lions, crocodiles, hippos. Each animal's essence was believed to influence the body in mysterious ways. In the tomb of a man named Parsa, a high-ranking courtier, inscriptions describe his well-maintained appearance as proof of his moral and political virtue. In the afterlife, it was believed one would be judged not just on deeds but on presentation. Even in the grave, a full head of hair or a carefully constructed wig mattered. For the Egyptians, this wasn't mere vanity. It was part of ma'at, the balance of life, the harmony of the self. To allow baldness to go untreated was, in a way, to permit disorder to take root in the soul. And so the daily rituals continued. Mixtures boiled, prayers whispered, ointments rubbed into sun-warmed scalps. But here's a question that lingers gently as the Nile breeze. Did these ancient cures ever actually work? Or was the act of care itself the real remedy? The morning. Sun rises again over the limestone walls of Thebes. You find yourself seated in a shaded corner of the open market, observing the gentle chaos of daily trade. Vendors call out their wares. papyrus baskets, alabaster jars, kohl for the eyes, and bundled herbs for the body. But your gaze settles on a narrow stall near the edge, beneath a fraying woven awning. A hand-painted sign hangs loosely above. For restoration of hair, strength of scent, and renewal of spirit. The stall belongs to Merit, an older woman with silver strands escaping from beneath her linen headwrap. She is not a physician, nor a priestess, but she carries the authority of both. Her table is neatly arranged with small jars of fragrant oils, strips of dried plant matter, and carefully rolled parchment slips detailing instructions and spells. Clients approach her quietly. Some seek relief from aching joints, others ask for perfumes, but most, you begin to notice, ask about hair. Baldness was, by now, no longer a shameful secret, but a public concern. And Merit, like many such herbalists, in urban Egypt, offered something more valuable than a solution. She offered hope, packaged in oils that glistened in the sun and wrapped in linen saturated with sandalwood. Her most prized item, a blend called Oil of Divine Growth. It contained castor oil, fenugreek, caraway, and fragments of dried ibex horn. The oil was to be warmed slightly, applied before dawn, and rubbed in counterclockwise while reciting a passage from the Hymn to Osiris. Whether it was medicine, magic, or marketing, who could say? What mattered was that it felt powerful. In the grander city temples, the priest-physicians held even more elaborate remedies. The temples of Heliopolis and Edfu were famous for their books of remedies, carved into stone walls or painted on thick papyrus scrolls. Some recipes took weeks to prepare, and were available only to those who donated to the temple or held rank. One scroll described a year-long treatment, a rotating cycle of crocodile fat, crushed fig bark, and ground lapis lazuli. When mixed with date wine and administered under a full moon, it was said to stimulate the scalp and calm the spirit. Wealthy men and women often employed attendants who specialized in these preparations. For the upper class, managing hair, whether restoring it, dyeing it, or concealing its loss, became a full-time pursuit. Wig makers thrived. In Memphis, certain neighborhoods were known specifically for their workshops. They used imported hair from Kush and Punt, cleaned and dyed it, and then shaped it into layered wigs, curls, and ceremonial braids. Interestingly, the wigs themselves were status objects. A simple shoulder-length piece was worn at home, but public appearances demanded grandeur. Heavy wigs with gold thread, lapis pins, or carved ivory combs embedded within. Pharaohs sometimes wore false beards tied with string beneath their chins, a symbol of divinity and permanence. In this world, synthetic appearance was not deceit, it was devotion. And what of the common folk? Baldness touched them too, though. Their approach was more practical. In towns along the Nile, villagers shared recipes passed down by word of mouth. A favorite among farmers was a mixture of palm sap, raw garlic, and pigeon droppings. It was said to sting terribly, but sting meant strength, and strength meant hope. Some simply accepted baldness as a fate. Others turned it into fashion. In certain parts of Lower Egypt, shaven heads were preferred, not just for hygiene but as a mark of clarity. A clean scalp, free of adornment, was sometimes seen as pious, closer to the gods. Priests, after all, shaved everything. Scalp, face, even body to remain ritually clean. A bald head could be holy depending on how it was worn. Still others turned to amulets. Small bronze charms shaped like Hathor's mirror or Horus's eye were strung on thin leather cords and worn close to the heart. These amulets were believed to channel divine favor, especially if an ailment seemed resistant to earthly cures. For hair loss, the charm would often be blessed by a local priest and then dipped into a bowl of sacred oil before being worn at night. Among scribes, those thinkers and writers of Egypt's soul, there was even poetry about hair. One fragment, found on a limestone shard, reads, "Gone is the shadow of my youth, my crown lies bare beneath Ra's gaze, but in this loss I find no shame, only the truth of passing days." The bald head in this quiet verse becomes a symbol of wisdom. And indeed, many older Egyptians came to accept the transformation. Hair was vanity. The loss of it? Perhaps liberation. Yet some were never content. They wandered from stall to stall, tried each potion, whispered every spell. They grew anxious, then resentful, and finally quiet. The pursuit of restoration, it seemed, was often less about the scalp and more about the self. As the sun sets behind the pylons of the temple and merchants begin packing their goods into cloth bundles, the day's transactions slowly conclude. You walk past Merritt's stall once more, her oil jars glinting in the low light, and you wonder, was the Egyptian obsession with hair truly about beauty? Or was it their way of trying to pause time, just for a moment, before it all slipped away? The candle flickers low in the corner of the room. You are sitting on a carved wooden stool, in a quiet chamber cooled by limestone walls and shaded by hanging reeds. It's the evening of your 6th decade. Your scalp, smooth and polished with oil, reflects the warm glow of lamplight. You have stopped chasing cures. You still visit the marketplace now and then, still nod respectfully to Merritt and the younger herbalists who now manage her stall. But your hands no longer reach for remedies. In time, most Egyptians reach this place, not just in age but in understanding. The body, no matter how lovingly anointed or cleverly disguised, would one day return to dust. And yet the rituals remained important, perhaps not for reversing time, but for holding it gently. As death approached, grooming took on an entirely new significance. Embalmers were instructed to restore a person's appearance to what it had been in their prime. This included not only reshaping the face and applying pigments to the cheeks and lips, but also carefully attaching wigs or painting the scalp with thick tar-black resin. In some mummies, preserved wigs remain intact, with strands curled in. The old styles of the 18th dynasty. These were not mere accessories. They were promises that in the field of reeds, the Egyptian afterlife, the deceased would appear youthful, whole, and unbalded. Funerary texts from the Book of the Dead included lines requesting Ra to restore the hair of the departed. Some sarcophagi even depicted the deceased with full heads of hair, regardless of how they'd actually looked in life. It wasn't a denial of death's effects, but rather a reassertion of identity. In death, the ideal self was revived, one's best self, polished and pristine. In this sense, hair care became a bridge between worlds. Tombs of nobles and officials often included jars labeled with inscriptions like hair oil for use in the afterlife or unguent for the regrowth of the ka. These items were placed beside more practical goods, bread, linen, board games. The soul, it was believed, would continue a life not unlike the one on earth. And what better way to begin that eternal journey than looking like yourself again? Even the gods, ever abundant in symbolism, had their own relationships with hair. Hathor, goddess of beauty and love, was often depicted with flowing locks. Isis, mourning Osiris, wore her hair disheveled in grief, a rare deviation from Egypt's usual orderliness. And Bes, the dwarf god of protection and childbirth, was almost always shown with wild, lion-like hair. He was invoked during times of transformation, birth, illness, and death. Perhaps even during balding. There's something endearing in this, how the Egyptians projected human insecurities onto divine figures and invited their help in the most personal matters. They didn't separate vanity from spirituality. Both were part of the human experience. But not all Egyptians were permitted such elaborate preparations. The poor, the enslaved, the forgotten, they died with little fanfare. Their scalps were not massaged with sacred oils, and no wigs were placed upon them. And yet, even among the poorest graves, archaeologists have found combs, broken flasks of scented oil, and simple hairpins. The desire to be seen, to be beautiful, to be whole, was not exclusive to class. It was human. In this quiet recognition, the boring becomes profound. Centuries passed. Dynasties rose and fell. Conquerors arrived. Ptolemaic kings brought Greek influences. Roman governors installed their own rituals. But in the homes of everyday people, the old remedies endured. Mothers taught daughters how to mix palm oils, and fathers passed on recipes written in fading demotic script. In every generation, someone stood before a polished bronze mirror and examined a thinning crown with a sigh. Today, those ancient jars rest in glass cases in museums. Harvard, Cairo, Berlin. Their contents long dried, their labels still legible. You might walk past them without noticing. A small pot labeled Kenet, another Nehe. A faded note reads, "To be applied nightly beneath the moon." And maybe, in that moment, you'll pause. Because these aren't just fragments of an old civilization. They are the quiet reminders that even across 3,000 years, people worried about how they looked. They sought comfort in ritual. They feared the signs of aging, and they wanted, above all, to feel seen. So perhaps the ancient Egyptian who sat patiently each morning as oil was rubbed into his crown didn't believe deep down that his hair would return. Maybe he just needed the moment, the pause, the connection, the belief that someone was trying to help him hold on to what mattered, and in that moment, the mundane became meaningful. So as you drift now, perhaps lying in bed, your own worries, softly dissolving into the night, consider the bald man of Thebes gazing into his polished mirror, not with shame, but with quiet defiance, because even in loss, there is dignity. And even in the boring, there is beauty. But here's a question to carry with you into sleep. If something as ordinary as a lost hairline meant so much to them, what are the quiet things we treasure today that might one day be dust, yet still tell the story of who we were? You're sitting in a cramped corner of a low mud brick building in an ancient city pressed into the banks of the Euphrates River. The walls around you are bare, sun-baked clay. The window is little more than a slit. Light filters in reluctantly, bringing with it a small breeze and a great deal of dust. You inhale slowly. The air is warm and heavy. Everything smells faintly of earth, ink, and human effort. Welcome to the office of a Mesopotamian scribe. There are no pens, no paper, no desks with drawers, just a wooden stool, a low table, and a basket of wet clay balls. Each one is about the size of a loaf of bread. These will become letters, contracts, receipts, prayers, schoolwork, inventories, whatever the city requires. The stylus in your hand is made of sharpened reed. Its edge is blunt, squared off. It's not for drawing. It's for pressing. Each wedge-shaped impression you make in the clay becomes a syllable in cuneiform, the earliest known writing system. Some symbols require a single press. Others take 3 or 4 careful taps. There's no room for error. Clay is forgiving, but only for a few minutes. Then it begins to dry. You've been at this for hours already. Today's tasks: 6 debt, tablets from a barley loan, 2 school exercises for a local merchant's son, and a notice from the temple priest demanding more fish this month. You also have to reinscribe a broken tablet from last week that cracked during baking. And you must do it all before the clay stiffens too much to shape. This is not glamorous work. It is not praised by poets, but it is essential. Scribes were the lungs of the city-state, quietly and constantly moving information. In temples, they recorded offerings and translated omens. In palaces, they tracked taxes and treaties. In workshops, they labeled bricks and crates of wool, and they did it all one tablet at a time. The clay must be just right, not too wet, not too dry. You keep a water jar at your feet to dampen the mixture. If it's too soft, the impressions smear. If it's too hard, the stylus bounces. You know how to feel it, how to judge the resistance under your fingertips. Behind you, a second basket waits. This one is filled with finished tablets. Each has been signed with a small cylinder seal, a carved rolling stamp pressed across the clay to prove authorship. Some are adorned with miniature scenes, a man kneeling before a god, a row of cattle, or a simple sun and mountain motif. Art and administration side by side. By mid-morning, the room has grown hot. You remove your linen head wrap, patting sweat from your brow. There is no break. The temple steward arrives with another request, a new price list for silver weights. He doesn't ask if you have time. He knows you will do it. That is your station. You recall your training, endless drills in the Aduba or scribal school, long hours spent copying the same characters over and over on practice tablets, which were then smoothed and reused. Your teacher, a strict man with missing teeth and an unforgiving temper, had no patience for crooked signs. He once made you rewrite an entire hymn because your car looked too much like a tar. But the training had purpose. Writing wasn't for the common folk. Most could not read. Scribes were intermediaries between power and population. What you etched became law. What you miswrote could cause real harm. Sometimes, as you work, you marvel at how the clay preserves thought. A few simple marks, and suddenly someone else, perhaps years from now, can read your mind. Even now, archaeologists are finding your kind's handiwork, still legible after 4,000 years. Contracts between farmers, prayers to forgotten gods, lists of sheep, birth records, all done in the same cramped rooms, under the same dusty light. Your hands are never truly clean. Bits of clay lodge beneath your nails, smudge your wrists. You carry the weight of information, quite literally. Some tablets are small, meant for private records. Others, like kingly edicts or temple archives, are enormous and take both arms to lift. For these, the drying process is delicate. A cracked tablet can mean disaster. Firing comes last. You set the tablets near a small courtyard kiln once the sun begins to cool. If it's not a permanent document, you skip this step. The raw clay will last for weeks in dry air. But contracts, treaties, and sacred texts must be hardened by fire. Only then are they eternal. Some scribes grow proud. They sign their tablets with elaborate personal seals and sometimes leave a little flair in the lettering. You do not. You are not a poet. You are a functionary, a quiet operator in the city's bloodstream. As evening falls, you stretch your arms. The tablets are lined neatly in baskets, each separated by papyrus slips. You return your stylus to its pouch, rinse your hands in a stone basin, and wipe the last traces of dust from your face. Another day's thoughts have been recorded. Not yours perhaps, but thoughts nonetheless. You have left behind no statue, no monument. But your work will last longer than both, and as you extinguish the small oil lamp on your writing table, you wonder, did the scribes of each generation feel the weight of memory in their hands, or did they simply press clay and pass time, unaware of what they were preserving? The morning starts before the sun climbs over the walls of Ur. The city is already murmuring, potters hammering jars from molds, ox carts creaking down the avenues, a distant chant from a ziggurat tower. You slip into your sandals and head back to the scribe's room, where the clay is cooling from the night's breeze. Today will be long. The tax rolls are due. There are 3 kinds of scribes in this city: temple scribes, palace scribes, and free scribes. You belong to the 3rd category. Independent, though often employed by both of the other 2, it's a delicate dance. You must stay in favor with the temple priests, who commission holy hymns and grain reports, and with the palace accountants, who demand accurate records of wool, copper, and livestock. And then there are your side jobs, the small things. Done for neighbors, a will written for a dying fisherman, a list of wedding gifts for a spice merchant, a rental agreement for a room with poor roofing and a view of the city gate. You begin the day by checking the drying tablets from yesterday. One has cracked, the edges curled inward slightly too quickly. It was a price inventory from the governor's storehouse. You sigh. It will have to be redone. Cracks are dangerous. They split names, make numbers unreadable, give cause for disputes. A scribe's mistake can become a merchant's lawsuit, or worse, a soldier's punishment. You collect a fresh lump of clay and begin pressing the numbers. Again. This time you go slower. Each wedge mark is made with careful pressure, measured breath, and a quiet rhythm. Tap, tap, slide, press. As you work, your apprentice enters, barely 12, bright-eyed, covered in dust. He carries a satchel of clay balls wrapped in linen. Today is his writing lesson. You nod toward the back corner of the room, where the broken tablets are kept for practice. The boy pulls out an old-school text, a copy of a classic list, the Sumerian king list with its absurd spans of years and dynastic glory. You hear him whisper as he writes, Alulim ruled for 28,800 years. Scribal education always begins with lists, not of ideas, but of things, names of trees, types of cattle, varieties of stone. He will spend months copying lists before he's allowed to write even a simple prayer. But that's the way it's always been. A good scribe must first know the world he is recording. By midday, the tax collector arrives. He is sweating and short of temper. He carries a wooden tally board and a long scroll. You've seen this man before. He once sent a baker to prison for 2 missing bushels of barley. He slaps the scroll onto your table and demands the record of wool deliveries from the district weavers. You open the clay storage chest. Pull out a heavy tablet from last month and begin reading aloud. Third moon, year of the great floods. 17 shekels worth from Ashratum's household. 10 from Lugal Malik. 3 from unregistered parties. He grunts. You add the new figures, inscribe a fresh tablet and hand him a copy. He doesn't thank you, he never does. After he leaves, you rub your eyes and take a short break. In the back of the room is a wall niche containing old styluses, faded documents, and a few broken tablets once signed by your own teacher. He's long dead now, but his markings remain, angular, tidy, firm. You learned from them, and now your apprentice will learn from yours. Not all writing is practical. Today you also have a request from a priest, a new copy of a hymn to Nana, the moon god. The old version was damaged in a temple flood. You retrieve the original from the archives, damp, worn but legible. Nana, bringer of tides, watcher in silver robes, keeper of dreams in the night sky. You press the words into soft clay, with quiet reverence. Here you can allow your hand to move a little more slowly. Poetry demands care, it is still function, but with a whisper of form. Outside, the sky begins to shift from blue to gold. You send your apprentice home. He's earned his rest. You, however, still have a delivery to make. You wrap several tablets in soft cloth, tuck them into a shoulder pouch, and make your way through the narrow streets of Along the way, you pass other scribes, some from the palace carrying orders wrapped in reeds, others from the temple walking in pairs, their faces solemn. You exchange brief nods. There's respect among scribes, a shared burden. Your final stop is a weaver's house. She is old, her hands rough with age. She cannot write, but she trusts you. You hand her the rental contract for the back room she's letting to her nephew. She thanks you with a handful of dried figs and a nod that says, I remember when your father was the scribe. You smile and walk back home in the darkening light, and as you return, the city winding down behind you, you feel the clay dust in your sleeves, your sandals, your hair. It clings to everything, and yet it is everything. It is memory, commerce, faith, and law. It is the burden of your station, and the reason continues to breathe. But you wonder sometimes, when the empire fades, the gods grow silent, and these cities return to sand. Who will still read the marks you pressed with such care? The air is still inside the archive. Here, tucked deep within the temple walls, is a room unlike any other in the city of There is no sound of the marketplace. No sheep bleating, no hammers striking bronze, no children running past open doors. Just rows of wooden shelves, jars of sealing wax, and hundreds, no thousands, of clay tablets stacked, wrapped, bundled, and catalogued. You're here for the monthly inventory. It's one of the quietest duties a scribe can have. Walking shelf to shelf, cross-referencing tablet contents with archival slips. Most of these documents are decades old, and many have not been read in years, but they remain, unmoved, patient, waiting. Your fingers run across the edge of a case containing trade agreements between and Elam. You remember copying one of these years ago for your teacher. Another shelf holds hymnals, still pressed with perfect symmetry. On the bottom shelf, tax receipts from the year of the locust swarm. The writing is cramped. Those were frantic days. The archive is a city within a city. It remembers what others forget. In one corner, there's a clay envelope. Yes, an actual envelope hardened around a tablet and sealed with a cylinder impression. It hasn't been broken. Whatever it holds, no one has needed it. Yet. It might be a loan, a will, or a list of grain deliveries. It might even be a letter. Letters were rare. Writing was costly. Most people could not write to each other. But when they did, scribes like you would compose, inscribe, and sometimes deliver the messages. Often they were formal. Requests for help, apologies, records of disputes. But a few were tender. Years ago, you inscribed one for a woman whose husband had been conscripted to a border outpost. She had dictated every word slowly, her voice shaking. To the one who tends the eastern gate, may your hands remain strong, and may you return before our child learns to speak. You'd pressed each mark with extra care, smoothing the clay afterward with an oiled cloth. It wasn't grand literature. It wasn't meant for the gods or the king, but it was real. She returned weeks later to thank you, her husband had replied, and you had transcribed his return message too. That tablet might still be here. You think sometimes about what it means to store words that are not yours. You are not the author. You are the recorder, the vessel, and yet your hands shaped them. Your pressure, your angle, your rhythm. In a way, the archive is not just filled with words, it is filled with fingerprints. As you move from shelf to shelf, you pause at a special case in the far wall. This one contains damaged or incomplete tablets, fragments, a prayer chipped in half, a decree burned at the edges. You reach for one, it's old, heavy, slightly warped. The writing is faint, faded from time, but it's there. A contract for a parcel of land, dated over 70 years ago. You turn it over and notice something unusual. Pressed lightly into the back of the tablet is a fingerprint, accidental most likely, from when the clay was still soft. It's too large for a child, too rough to be noble. Just an ordinary hand leaving a mark not meant to be seen. You trace it with your thumb. This is what remains. Not the king's name, not the temple edict, not the law, but a print from a man who held wet clay and tried to preserve something. The archive reminds you of this, that history is not made only of empires and battles. Sometimes it's a rent agreement, a price list, a letter home, and sometimes it's simply a pause between thoughts caught in hardened earth. The sun has lowered outside. A beam of gold light passes through a high window and falls across the shelves. You gather your inventory notes, blow the dust from your stylus, and prepare to leave. Outside, the world continues. Merchants shouting, carts rolling, bakers heating ovens. But the archive remains still. The thoughts it holds do not age. They do not grow loud. They wait. And as you close the door behind you, you feel again the weight of clay in your fingertips and wonder, in the end, what survives of us? The words we spoke, or the marks we left while trying to remember them? You are standing at the edge of the desert, beneath a clear, shimmering sky. The ground is cracked and golden, the air dry and still. And yet, before you is a mound of snow. Not much. Just a small pile, protected by brick walls, shaded by thatched roofing and dusted with straw. Around it, workers move quietly. One trims the edges of the ice, another layers straw. A third is tallying jars of pomegranate syrup ready to be chilled. You are not dreaming. This is not magic. This is refrigeration, ancient style. You're in Persia, not the empire at its height, but a modest city on its outskirts, where people live in flat-roofed homes and grow apricots in shaded gardens. It's the 5th century BCE, and summer is just beginning. The mountain snow has already begun its long journey. Not in rivers, but in carts, packed tight, covered in wool, hauled down the rocky passes on muleback. This snow is not for everyone. It is a luxury, a marvel, a carefully preserved treasure. The locals call the structure a yakchal, an ice pit. But that name doesn't do it justice. It's more like a dome. Wide at the base, narrowing to a high cone with thick walls made of mud brick and camel hair plaster. Inside it's cold, cold enough to keep the ice solid through even the hottest months. You duck through the arched doorway. The air changes, instantly. It smells of earth and water, of straw and silence. The chamber is dim, with only a narrow shaft of light entering from the top. Around you are blocks of mountain ice, some already melting slightly, their moisture soaking the straw, matting beneath. A boy moves past you carrying 2 shallow bowls. One holds snow, the other slices of melon. He is making faluda, a kind of early sorbet, stringy and sweet. It will be served later today to the city's satrap and his guests. Not for nourishment, not even for hydration, but for wonder. Because there is something marvelous about tasting snow in the heart of summer. These ice houses are feats of engineering. They are built with thick, insulating walls, up to 2 meters deep in some places. The base of the pit is dug below ground level to take advantage of the cooler earth. Water runoff drains through sloped floors. Ventilation shafts are placed precisely to keep hot air out and let cooler air circulate. And they're not new. Versions of these structures have existed for centuries already. In the highlands of ancient Media, in the cities of Elam, even further east in Bactria. Some are public, others are maintained by noble families. In some regions they're attached to temples. The priests preserve not only food, but also ritual, offerings, cool milk for summer festivals, cold rose water for bridal rites. What surprises most is not that the ice is preserved, but that it is collected in the first place. Each winter, teams of men climb the mountains with wide wooden sleds. They dig into the snowpack, form dense blocks and slide them down the slopes. In some places, shallow freezing pools are used, open at night to let water freeze, then harvested before sunrise. The blocks are wrapped in straw, packed with sawdust, and layered in caravans heading downhill. It is slow, laborious, fragile, but when done right, the ice can survive for months. Once in the yakchal, it serves many uses. For the elite, it cools drinks, preserves fruits, and makes confections. For the sick, it lowers fevers or soothes burns. For temples, it's a mark of devotion, used in offerings where heat might corrupt the ritual. Occasionally, it is even traded, bartered between towns, weighed carefully, and guarded like spice or silver. In rare cases, ice is sent as a gift. One record, partially preserved in cuneiform, mentions a block of snow delivered to a distant court during the reign of Darius III. It was packed in clay jars lined with pitch and straw, transported over 100 miles. Did it survive? Likely not. But the gesture alone spoke volumes. You sit now beneath the arch of the yakchal, watching the ice glisten in the filtered light. A servant walks by, ladling water into ceramic bowls and placing them into the corner where evaporation cools the room further. Nothing here is electric, nothing automated. And yet the space is colder than many modern rooms in summer. The ingenuity is quiet. No fanfare, no spectacle, just thick walls, mountain snow, and 1,000 years of observation. And you begin to see that ice in this world is more than a convenience. It is a symbol of reach, of wealth, of planning. It is nature bent gently, respectfully to human need. The Persian Empire stretched far and wide, but even at its height it could not command the weather. It could only adapt to it. And here, in this humble dome of mud and straw, it found a way to hold winter in its hands, even as the desert heat baked the stones outside. You step back out into the sunlight. The contrast stuns you. The wind is dry again. The dust returns. But you feel briefly like you've touched something rare, fragile, fleeting, and astonishing. And you wonder, how many hands, across how many centuries, work together to make snow last longer than a season? The camels creak beneath their loads. You're following a caravan now, across dusty plains in the eastern reaches of the empire. The road is narrow, pressed between low hills and dry riverbeds. The air is thick, with heat, the kind that silences even birdsong. And yet, packed tightly in the clay-lined panniers strapped to each animal's side, is snow. Or more precisely, ice, wrapped in bundles of straw, packed with layers of wool, bound tightly in goat-hide sacks. Some will melt before reaching their destination. That's expected. But enough will survive to make the journey worthwhile. You are headed west now, toward Palmyra, toward Damascus, toward Rome. Ice, it turns out, had a journey of its own. While Persia preserved it in sunken domes and sacred vaults, the Romans chased it in other ways, harnessing elevation instead of architecture. In the Apennine Mountains, above the rolling vineyards and terraced olive groves, lie shallow pits carved into the slopes. These nivaria, early Roman ice pits, were filled with winter snow, compressed with wooden paddles and covered with straw and soil. As spring arrived, the snow compacted into solid ice beneath its thermal seal. And in the months that followed, servants were dispatched to extract blocks and load them into insulated carts, bound for the villas of the wealthy. It was not a business for the impatient. Every step had to be planned. Travel had to occur at night. Storage had to be prearranged. The melting rate had to be known almost to the hour. Roads had to be free of conflict, banditry, or flood, and even with all that, much of the ice was lost before it ever reached the tongue, but that wasn't the point. For aristocratic Romans, it was never about efficiency. It was about refinement. A bowl of chilled fruit offered during a summer banquet, a goblet of snow cooled, wine in a marble atrium. These were statements, quiet ones, not shouted but noticed. The Emperor Nero, it is said, had runners bring snow from the Apennines to his court during the peak of summer. He would mix it with honey and rosewater, creating a kind of soft ice cream, sweet, fragrant, and shocking against the heat. This wasn't a daily indulgence. It was a seasonal spectacle, but it inspired imitation. In Pompeii, in the shadowed streets behind the bathhouses and markets, vendors began experimenting with cooled treats. Simple crushed ice, served with grape must or pomegranate syrup. A poor man's luxury. Rare, yes, but not impossible. Roman engineers even explored ways to make the snow last longer. Cellars were dug beneath villas. Clay amphorae were glazed and layered with insulation. Sometimes pits were lined with seaweed or reed soaked in vinegar, as early insulation experiments. But most impressive of all were the taxes. Yes, ice was taxable. In certain cities, a portion of collected snow or ice was tithed to the state. Some went to temples, some to magistrates. In large villa estates, slaves were tasked each winter with harvesting a quota of snow from designated peaks. It was weighed, recorded, and failure to meet your snow quota? That could result in a fine, or in larger regions, a shortfall penalty, in silver. And what did all this effort serve? Moments of coolness, of comfort, of surprise, and perhaps control. Because to control cold in the midst of heat was a kind of mastery. An illusion of power over nature. A fleeting one, yes, but potent. You arrive now at the outskirts of a Roman domus. The servant who greets your caravan is young, sweating, and tense. He checks the seals on the straw-packed jars. Some have leaked. A few are still cold to the touch. He nods in relief. The shipment is accepted. Inside the villa, slaves are already preparing a shaded table. Slices of peach and fig are fanned across silver plates. A ceramic bowl is filled with fresh snow. It will melt before the hour ends. But for now, it is enough. You sit outside the villa's kitchen wall, catching your breath. Around you, the fields shimmer in the sun, cicadas sing, and someone just meters away takes a bite of fruit cooled by snow that once sat on a mountaintop. There are no crowds, no applause, just quiet satisfaction. You begin to understand why this work was done. Not just for the rich, but for the idea that something cold, something ephemeral could be carried across continents by human hands. Not for survival, not for war, but for comfort. Even today, you realize, we rarely think of ice as a luxury. But here, in this long-ago world, it was as valuable as spice and just as carefully guarded. And you begin to wonder, what other fleeting comforts were once so precious, so pursued and so easily forgotten? The last of the ice has melted. It always does. You're standing now in a quiet courtyard, somewhere in Anatolia. The Yakchals of Persia are behind you. The Roman ice pits of Italy fade into memory. You are in between. The world is changing. Empires falling, cities crumbling, trade routes shifting like sand. And in the center of it all, a clay bowl, still damp from the last traces of snow, sits on a stone ledge beneath a fig tree. No one comes for it. The house is empty. Its owners fled months ago. Raiders, taxes, drought. Who remembers? What remains is not the luxury, not the cold, but the method. In a nearby storeroom sealed against time, you find records, small wax tablets listing the routes once used for snow delivery. A hill marked with an asterisk. Hold here for moonlight travel. Another note. Wrap out a layer in double wool. Then, deliver before third watch or all is wasted. Wasted. A word that appears often in these old logs. So much of the ice was lost. Melted on roads, spoiled in jars, forgotten on carts that overturned in ravines. And yet they kept doing it. The engineers kept building. The runners kept climbing. The handlers kept packing. Not because they could preserve every block, but because preserving some was worth it. The pursuit itself became part of the culture. Over time, the Yakchal designs spread, east toward India and Central Asia. In Kashmir, Merchants began storing snow from the Himalayas in underground chambers. In northern China, ice was cut from lakes and buried beneath straw in deep pits. In Japan, priests of Shinto shrines preserved winter ice in shaded ice houses called himuro, believed to be sacred spaces where the gods of cold dwelled. In each place, the design changed slightly, but the idea remained: preserve the cold, even when the sun burns high, even when the cities fall, even when the people forget. It was the quietest form of rebellion against heat, against impermanence, against nature, and sometimes against time. In the 8th century, Arabic texts described new cooling devices, large clay pots with porous walls that slowly allowed water to evaporate, cooling the contents inside. These zir pots were used not just for water, but for medicine, fruit, and even dairy. Ice was still traded in some places, but now it was joined by ingenuity. Even the idea of ice for the sick persisted. In one preserved Persian medical scroll, a physician notes, "For fever, the touch of snow is as precious as saffron." He advises cooling linen cloths soaked in ice water and placing them on the forehead. Simple, effective, reverent, by the E. 16th century, Italian nobles were still collecting mountain snow, storing it in neviere, and serving chilled lemon drinks in the gardens of Florence. In Mughal India, records mention carts of ice arriving at dawn to cool mango pulp before a feast. And in colonial New England, long before electricity, blocks of ice were stored in wooden sheds packed with sawdust to be used through the summer. Then came the age of machines. In the 19th century, ice harvesting became an industry. Lakes were carved into grids. Workers cut neat blocks, stored them in insulated warehouses, and shipped them across oceans. Boston ice appeared in Calcutta. Norwegian ice reached Alexandria. For the first time in history, ordinary people could access what once belonged only to emperors and priests, and with that, something quiet disappeared. The ritual, the climb, the handmade vaults and hand-drawn plans. Yakchals fell out of use, their domes collapsed. The Nivaria were forgotten in overgrown forests. Snow caravans stopped. There were faster ways now, cheaper, colder. But what the ancients did was not about just the result. It was about the attempt. They built cathedrals of mud and straw for a thing that would always melt. They made room for cold in a hot world. And in that, there is something deeply human. Because even now in your modern room, perhaps cooled by a hum of electricity, there is a glass beside your bed filled with ice cubes. You hear them crack gently, shift slightly. You don't think about how they got there. But once someone would have crossed a desert for that sound. You look up at the stars, familiar, unchanged. You wonder how many yakchals still stand, empty and crumbling beneath this sky. How many fingerprints still remain on broken amphorae that once carried melting snow. How many forgotten walls still whisper of the miracle of cold in a season of heat. And you ask, was it ever really about the ice? Or about the people who tried to hold onto something that was always slipping away? The mist hangs low over the cobbled streets. A thin layer of fog presses against the window panes of the schoolhouse, blurring the light from within. It is early, not yet 7. The coal fire has only just been lit. The bell hangs silent in the front gable, waiting for the hour. You are standing outside a modest one-room Victorian school in a small English village. The year is 1874. The air smells faintly of smoke, damp wool, and yesterday's bread. This is not the city. This is not London with its new railways and factories. This is the countryside, where horses outnumber bicycles and school is still. A new idea for most children. Compulsory education had only recently begun. The 1870 Education Act had made it law. Every child between the ages of 5 and 10 must now attend. And so they come, reluctantly, in patched boots and oversized coats, rubbing sleep from their eyes and carrying their slates under their arms. The schoolmistress arrives first. She's not young, but not old. Her dress is practical. Her bonnet tightly tied. She carries a brass key and a brown bag filled with notebooks, a small pot of ink, a ruler, and a tin of boiled sweets, rewards perhaps, or bribes. She opens the heavy wooden door, steps into the dark, and sets her things on the teacher's desk. The room smells of chalk and coal dust. Its walls are bare, save for a map of the British Empire and a moral motto painted in careful letters above the blackboard: duty first, joy second. The fire is coaxed to life with crumpled paper and broken twigs. The coals catch slowly. The room will take an hour to warm. At exactly 8 o'clock the bell is rung, not by clock but by habit. Its clang echoes down the road, past the chapel, past the greengrocer, and into the cottages beyond. Children begin to arrive in twos and threes. There are no uniforms, just what they have. Boys in breeches and long socks, girls in pinafores over thick skirts. Some carry lunches wrapped in cloth, cold potato, hard bread, or if they're lucky, a bit of apple. Each child enters quietly and stands by their desk. There are no greetings, no chatter. They wait. The teacher gives a nod, and the day begins. Tantes. First half hour is scripture. The class recites a passage from Psalms followed by the Lord's Prayer. This is not just education, it is discipline, it is routine, it is the setting of tone. Next comes copywork. The children open their slates, flat, boards framed in wood, their surfaces darkened by soot or oil. They take out small chalk stubs worn to the nub and begin copying the day's line. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Each child writes it 5 times, or 10, if their lettering is poor. The teacher walks between the rows, glancing down, sometimes tapping a knuckle with her ruler. Not harshly, just enough to remind spelling follows. Words are read aloud. The children repeat them in chorus. The room is filled with quiet rhythmic noise. Discipline. D-I-S-C-I-P-L-I-N-E. Mistakes are corrected immediately. Some children stumble over the PH sounds, others forget silent letters. A boy in the back, Thomas, writes everything backwards. No one is quite sure why. He says little, but he tries. At mid-morning, the fire has finally warmed the air. The windows are cracked open to let in a breeze. Children stretch their fingers. The teacher distributes ink, not pens, just nibs on wooden shafts, dipped into small ink wells recessed. Into the desks. The ink is thick, the paper thin. Smudges are inevitable. Today's task: write a letter to Queen Victoria. Not a real one, of course, but a practice in formality. Each student must address her properly, express loyalty and sign their name. Some write of her greatness, others copy what they think she wants to hear. A few girls draw small crowns in the corners, hoping it might please the teacher. The younger children write only their names over and over again. One spills ink, another sneezes. A third raises her hand and whispers that she forgot how to spell majesty. The teacher writes it on the board and reminds them, always begin with respect. Then, arithmetic, numbers on the board, slates again. The lesson is quiet but tense, long division, simple sums, fractions. Some children solve quickly, others guess. Mistakes are corrected publicly, not to shame but to reinforce. This is the Victorian method. Repeat until remembered. There is no math anxiety here, only math endurance. At noon, the bell rings again. Lunch. The children file outside, single line, no running. They sit on benches or the grass, depending on the weather. There is no playground, no equipment, no games, just space. Some eat slowly, others don't eat at all. A few trade bites of bread or crumbs of cheese. After lunch, a girl reads a poem aloud. How doth the little busy bee improve each shining hour? It's not her favorite, but it's on the list. She stumbles over the word endeavor. The teacher waits. She tries again. This time, her voice is stronger. The afternoon is for handwriting, natural history, and, if time permits, a bit of drawing. A leaf, a fish, a diagram of the solar system. The last lesson is always the same. Silence, not punishment, not meditation. Just 10 minutes of stillness before dismissal. No talking, no scribbling, just quiet. It is during this time that the teacher takes her notes. She marks the attendance register, writes small comments in the margins. Henry spoke out of turn. Edith helped young George tie his shoes. Mildred is falling behind again. Then, the final bell. Children rise. Chairs are tucked in. Slates collected. Inkwells capped. No cheers. No wild exits, just quiet footsteps. And as the last child leaves, you remain for a moment longer, watching the dust float in the shaft of light from the tall window. The room is still, the fire low, the desks lined in patient rows. This is not a grand palace of learning. There are no libraries here, no philosophy, no science beyond the simple. And yet, this is where a generation begins to read, to count, to listen, to endure. And you wonder, in a world filled with noise, what did these children carry with them from the silence of slate and chalk? The morning begins with frost on the windows. The fire has not yet warmed the room, and your breath curls in the air as you step inside the schoolhouse. The floorboards creak beneath your boots. A faint trace of chalk dust lingers on the teacher's desk where yesterday's notes, Roman numerals I to X, are still faintly visible on the blackboard. There is a quiet routine here. The same as always. The teacher arrives first. Today her shawl is drawn tighter around her shoulders. She carries a hot brick wrapped in cloth to keep her fingers warm. She does not complain. Instead, she begins preparing the room. Ink is poured, desks checked. A fresh passage is written on the board in flowing, careful script. To learn is to serve. At 8 o'clock the bell rings again. The children file in, slower than yesterday. Their fingers are red from the cold. Some carry small bundles of firewood as a contribution to the school's coal pile. It's expected, though not enforced. The teacher nods with silent thanks to each donor. As the lesson begins, there is no talk of the weather, no delay. The day starts with recitation, not reading but speaking from memory. This is the backbone of Victorian education. Rote learning, repetition, precision. Today, it's the counties of England. One student stands and begins. Kent, Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire, Berkshire. She falters, the teacher waits. Another child raises his hand and continues the list. When he finishes, the class claps just once in unison. Then comes geography. The teacher unfurls a wall map with stiff yellowed edges. It shows the British Empire in red, broad, blotchy, and stretching across the globe. Canada, India, Australia, Egypt. The children take turns pointing with a long stick. They name capital cities, rivers, mountain ranges. They do not ask questions. Curiosity is not punished, but neither is it expected. This is a lesson of memorization, not discussion. A boy named Samuel traces the Nile River and says, "This is where the crocodiles live." A few giggle. The teacher lets it pass. Sometimes imagination seeps through the cracks of routine. Next, penmanship. The ink is cold today. It clots quickly. The children dip their pens more often, tapping gently against the ceramic inkwells embedded in each desk. The sound is rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. Today's task, a full page of the letter G. The teacher paces between the rows, inspecting posture, grip, angle. She adjusts a wrist here, a shoulder there. A girl in the front row is left-handed. Her letters smear. The teacher gently turns her paper to help. There are no special allowances, but there is patience. In the corner of the room, the youngest children copy shapes, circles, triangles, a wobbly attempt at a star. Their hands are small. The chalk is large, mistakes are wiped clean without fuss. Then morality. A short story is read aloud. A tale of a poor boy who tells the truth, even when it costs him a new pair of boots. When the story ends, the teacher pauses and says, "And what does this teach us?" No one answers at first. Then one child raises a hand and says, "That honesty matters more than reward." The teacher nods. She writes the word integrity on the board. They will copy it later. After a short break, the class returns to natural history. Today's specimen is a hedgehog skull, borrowed from the local vicar. It sits in a small wooden box, resting on a square of velvet. The teacher does not touch it. She points to it with a ruler and describes its teeth, its habits, its diet. The children lean forward, not out of fascination necessarily, but because anything different, anything real, breaks the routine in small and welcome ways. A boy sketches the skull in his notebook, his pencil trembling slightly from cold. His drawing is not accurate, but it is careful. As the day continues, there are no surprises. Arithmetic, fractions again, word problems involving bushels of apples and rows of cabbages. Every lesson is rooted in the familiar, the domestic, the moral. Learning is not for exploration, it is for shaping. The teacher closes the book and writes 2 final equations on the board. 3/5 plus 1/5 e, 3/4 of 20. E. She lets them puzzle silently. No hints, no rephrasing. In this classroom, struggle is not failure. It is part of formation. Later, during handwriting, the classroom grows even quieter, only the sound of nibs scratching paper. The fire now hums gently. Fingers are warm. Ink flows. The line today: the reward of patience is progress. Each child copies it without complaint. Some smile slightly. Others concentrate too hard for emotion. But all write, all press down slowly. All leave behind a record of their effort. By the end of the day, the teacher dismisses them with a nod. No prizes, no announcements, just the tapping of boots across floorboards, the creak of the door and the slow return to homes where lessons are not often discussed, but remembered. And as you remain for just a few more moments, staring at the fading marks on slates and the last curls of smoke from the fire, you realize something. This room, though simple, shaped minds, not with grand ideas, but with daily discipline, not with sparks of insight, but with slow chiseling of memory. It was not designed to inspire, it was designed to prepare. And yet, you wonder, in a world built on ambition and change, what did these children learn from repetition, structure, and the quiet confidence of routine? It is the final Friday of the term. A cold breeze sweeps in through the cracks in the windows, but inside the schoolhouse, the coal fire burns bright. The desks are polished, the blackboard is clean. A few sprigs of holly, gathered from a nearby hedgerow, have been tied to the mantel above the fireplace with string. Something about today feels different. The teacher stands at the door, her brass key in hand, her shoulders straight. She wears her good brooch, the one shaped like a small owl. Her boots have been freshly scrubbed. On her desk is a stack of ruled paper, a box of pencils, and a single piece of folded cloth. Inside it, boiled sweets and striped peppermint sticks. The children arrive in the usual way, quietly, orderly, but they too feel the difference. Some have brushed their hair with extra care. A few boys wear stiff, high collars that itch. One girl clutches a ribbon that was carefully stitched into her braid that morning. They know it's not a normal day. There will be no arithmetic today, no slate drills, no dictation or scripture. Today is for recital. The room settles. The register is taken. The teacher offers no long speech, only a simple nod and a reminder. Speak clearly. Stand tall. Think before you begin. The first child rises. He recites a poem by heart. The village blacksmith, his voice steady but a little fast. He fidgets with his sleeves. He skips one stanza. The teacher does not interrupt. At the end, she nods again. The next child follows. Rule, Britannia. So not sung but recited in full. She has practiced it all week with her older brother. Her voice carries. One by one the children stand and perform. A reading from the book of Proverbs, a story written by hand the week before about a fox and a keel. Stolen pie. The names of the counties of England recited in strict alphabetical order, only one mistake. A shy boy reads a short note he wrote to the Queen, thanking her for the schools and the ink. The room is quiet after each. The silence is not cold, it is filled with respect. Here even the youngest voices are given space. Then comes the teacher's turn. She opens a thin linen-bound book from her desk. The children shift forward in their seats. It is a story about a robin in the snow, searching for food. It is simple, gently told. The kind of story no one would publish, but everyone remembers. When it ends, she looks up and says only, "That's how we learn, by watching." Even the smallest creatures are teachers, and the room absorbs it. Next comes the prize table. It is small, just 3 books, well worn but cherished, 2 slates with polished frames, and a cloth bag of marbles. The teacher announces the names carefully, not by rank or marks, but by effort. For trying, even when tired. For neatest, penmanship on Tuesday mornings. For never once saying I can't, the children come forward slowly, no applause, no envy, only quiet pride. The rest receive their reports, small folded cards with marks for spelling, arithmetic, attendance, and conduct. Most marks are fair or improving. A few are needs effort. No one is surprised. At the bottom of each card, the teacher has written a single sentence, handwritten in ink. Edith shows growing confidence. George must remember to listen before acting. Samuel brings kindness with him every day. These are not for the inspector. They are for the families, a glimpse of their child through the teacher's eyes. As the afternoon sun leans low, the teacher leads one last reading. To everything there is a season. She closes the Bible gently. The final bell is rung. Chairs are tucked in, slates stacked, ink pots cleaned. There is no rush to leave. Some linger uncertain, as if saying goodbye to something invisible. Outside, the village is quiet, the fields bare. The wind has picked up again. One by one, the children walk down the path, their breath visible in the crisp air, their shoes crunching, softly over the gravel, and then the schoolhouse is empty. The teacher remains. She sweeps the floor slowly, not because it must be done, but because it helps her think. She places the leftover sweets into a jar on her desk. She folds the flag. She places the Robin story back, in her book. And finally she walks to the blackboard and writes one last line, to wait for the children when they return in spring. You are always learning, even when you don't know it. She steps back, looks at it, smiles. Then she locks the door behind her. And now, as we drift away from the cold stone walls, the rows of ink-stained desks, the echo of footsteps down the lane, you find yourself wondering, in a world that never stops moving, what remains from a room where so little changed, except the children themselves? The year is 1742. You are standing in a low-beamed storehouse in rural Japan, where the smell of straw, old rice, and faint ink fills the still air. A faint breeze pushes through the paper screens along the far wall. It's early morning. You can hear the soft shuffling of sandals outside and the first creak of wooden wheels from a farmer's cart approaching the gate. You are not in a palace, not in a temple, not on a battlefield. You're in a tax office, and today, like every day, rice will be counted. The Edo period, peaceful, rigid, unhurried, lasted over 260 years. During this time, Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate, and its economy revolved. Not around coins or currency, but around something more practical: rice. Measured in koku, a unit representing enough rice to feed one man for 1 year. Rice was both wealth and tax. Farmers owed it, lords measured their power in it, and you record it. You are a nengu chosha, a tax scribe. Your job is not glamorous. You sit on a woven mat behind a wide, low table with a small lacquered box beside you holding your tools: a bamboo brush, a ceramic inkstone, a folded cloth for blotting, and a bound ledger. The pages are thick, fibrous, and yellowed at the edges. On the wall hangs a wooden placard listing today's quotas: villages, dates, expected yields. You've already reviewed it twice. You know what's due. The doors creak open. 2 farmers step inside, carrying heavy sacks slung over their shoulders. They bow low. You nod without speaking. Another man, taller, with a short sword and official crest on his sleeve, steps forward to weigh the delivery. He is the koku measurer. His presence ensures fairness. The balance scale is adjusted. The rice is lifted in large baskets, grain by grain, sliding into the shallow trays. You don't touch the rice. Your job is to write. Brush in hand, you dip into ink, roll your wrist slightly, and begin marking the figures. Village of Ueno, 14 koku, third harvest, no deductions. Quality, acceptable. You glance at the grains in the basket. Plump, pale, clean. If it had been low quality, mottled, or mixed with husks, a deduction would be made. But this load is good. You mark it clean. Behind you, other scribes work silently, each at a station, each hunched slightly, their sleeves folded up to avoid dragging across wet ink. The farmers sign with their seals, simple marks pressed into damp clay next to their entry. The clay dries and is filed with the ledger. No paper trail, only ink, weight, and silence. You continue this process for hours. Sometimes carts bring larger loads, dozens of sacks pulled by oxen or dragged by hand. These are stored in the back, rooms carefully labelled. Other times only a few bags arrive, offered by households that struggled with weather, pests, or drought. In those cases, notes are made. Yield lower than expected due to late rains. Request for partial deferral submitted. You don't judge, you don't advise, you record. The ledger grows heavier with each entry. The ink pot is refilled. The light shifts on the tatami floor. At midday, you break for rice and pickled plum. The other scribes eat in silence beneath the eaves, their eyes half closed, letting the sun warm their backs. Outside, more carts wait. In the storehouse, the back room is cool and dim. Here, rows of labelled rice sacks are stacked against wooden walls. Thin cords tie each bag shut. Small paper tags hang from each, handwritten by you and your colleagues. These stores are part of the regional kurayashiki, the rice warehouse system that feeds the domain. This rice will pay samurai stipends, support village repairs, and be used as offerings at the shrine on festival days, but for now it just sits. You sometimes wonder how many grains pass through your hands in a year, not physically, but on paper. You never touch them, yet you carry their weight in ledgers. Every tax, every tribute, every measure of survival and struggle, it becomes a line in your register. You think of the villagers who bow as they leave, shoulders lighter, hands cracked from harvest. You wonder if they hate you, or if they simply forget you the moment they step outside. And then there are the rats, always the rats. They slip in at night, clever and persistent. You've seen one scamper between sacks during a winter shift. They gnaw, tear, scatter. Not because they're hungry, but because they can. The overseers set traps. The warehouse cats are fed well, but still, they come. There's a page in your ledger for loss to pests. Rodent damage, North Storehouse 2 koku. The Shogun's government allows for this. It's expected. Nature does not obey ledgers. It eats what it finds. Sometimes you envy the rats. They move freely. You stay behind the desk, year after year, writing names, numbers, reasons. But then again, your job ensures order. Without your brush, no rice is owed, no payment is made. The economy, such as it is, stalls. So you keep writing. As the sun sets behind the tiled roof of the storehouse, the farmers stop arriving. The doors are closed. The inkstones are cleaned. The ledgers stacked in rows. You brush the remaining grains of rice from your mat, blot your hands clean and wrap your tools in cloth. You step outside into the quiet dusk. The sky is pale orange, fading quickly to blue. Smoke rises from nearby chimneys. A single bell rings from the village watchtower, marking the hour. You carry the weight of hundreds of harvests in your hands, not in grain, but in memory. And as you walk home through narrow alleys, you wonder, in a world so defined by what we grow and give, what stories are hidden between the numbers we quietly record? The first frost came last night. You can see its trace on the edge of the fields as you pass, faint silver clinging to the dried husks of harvested rice stalks, long since bundled and stacked beneath straw roofs. The season of growth is over. Now begins the season of reckoning. Inside the tax office, the light is low and yellow. Thin beams from the rising sun catch the curls of steam rising from a brazier in the corner. Your hands hover near the heat for a moment before you begin. The ink will flow slowly in this chill, so you warm the brush tip gently, then grind it into the inkstone with a rhythm you've repeated hundreds of times before. Today is not for fresh rice delivery. Today is for adjustments. The harvests, though measured and logged, are rarely perfect. Villages report losses after the fact. Claims of pestilence, of rain too early or too late, of spoiled stores, of illness among workers. Each report is reviewed by a Nengu Bugyo, a domain tax inspector, who decides whether the explanation warrants a deduction. And then, someone, like you, records the verdict. You open the ledger. Today's section is labeled Post-Harvest Amendments and Notes, 9th month, Year of the Horse. The first entry is from a village upriver. 4.5 koku deducted due to flooding, confirmed by inspection. 2.5 koku to be delivered from neighboring surplus in the 10th month. You write it slowly, letting the brushstroke dry before moving on. The ink must be clear for the shogun's representatives. If a digit is smudged, the wrong household might lose their winter food. Accuracy is not pride, it is survival. Behind you, the warehouse overseer arrives. He unrolls a long scroll of delivery slips. There's a problem. A cart that arrived last week, registered under a family name from the Eastern District, brought 5 koku more than expected. But the name was not on the official list. The tax had already been marked as fulfilled. You flip through the ledger. No duplicate, no mention. It is a ghost delivery. The farmers likely misunderstood, or perhaps they tried to pay extra in anticipation of next year's shortage. In either case, the entry must be corrected. Rice cannot float in bureaucratic limbo. You write in the margin, surplus delivery, unknown origin, assigned to reserve store, reviewed next audit. It's one more invisible thread in a system woven tightly across the archipelago. And then there are the samurai. They do not work the land. They are owed rice as payment for their service to the domain. Their stipends, recorded in koku, are drawn from the very stores you maintain. Each month one of them arrives to collect his share. Today it's a younger man. You've seen him before. He is polite, precise, and always carries a book under his arm. Not a sword, but a book. On Confucian history, you think. You hand him the slip. He signs with his personal seal, a neatly carved square of red ink. The warehouse attendants load the sacks into a cart waiting near the gate. He thanks you, bows and leaves. That rice, grown by someone else, harvested by another, recorded by you, will now feed his family, pay his servants, and be offered at his family's shrine. You wonder if he ever thinks of the chain that brought it to him. Later, an elderly farmer arrives alone. He carries no cart. Just a folded letter and a walking stick. You recognize his name. He missed last season's delivery. His wife died. His youngest son moved to Osaka. The harvest was weak. He does not plead. He simply places the letter, handwritten, surprisingly neat, onto your desk. It is a request for Yoshi, an extension. You read it, then look up. The farmer bows low and remains that way until you speak. You are not a judge. You cannot forgive his tax. But you can forward the request with a note of recommendation. So you do, and as he slowly exits, his sandals dragging across the wooden floor, you make a quiet note beside his entry. Delayed, not refused. Worthy of mercy. That's not an official phrase, but others will understand. In the corner of the storehouse, 2 young assistants are sweeping up loose grains. Rats have been in again. You walk over to inspect. A sack has a hole. The damage is minimal. Half a koku, perhaps. But the loss must be logged. You kneel and press your seal onto a small slip, affixed with wax, and place it beside the damaged sack. Tomorrow it will be counted. Next week, replaced. But today, it is just one more line in a ledger. As the afternoon deepens, the sun sinks low and turns the paper on your desk a pale gold. You close the current register and open a new one. Blank pages, bound in twine, with just one line written inside the front cover. For the 11th month, year of the horse, official copy, North. Grain office. You dip your brush. You breathe in the scent of dried ink, old wood, and rice husk, and you begin the first line. Village of Inari. Expected yield, 23 koku. Another month begins, another scroll of names, another chain of hands. And as you continue, your back slightly aching, the inkstone nearly dry, you wonder, when all of this is forgotten, what will remain? The rice itself, or the invisible web of effort that made it count? It is snowing now. Soft, slow flakes drift down onto the thatched roof of the grain office, muffling the usual morning sounds. No carts today, no farmers waiting at the gate. Only a gentle hush as the world outside becomes white. Inside, the fire is already lit. The brazier's coals are glowing, and a kettle of barley tea sits to the side, steaming faintly. You sit at your post with wool wrapped around your shoulders, brush in hand, ready for a quieter day. The harvest season has ended. Now begins the season of balance sheets. The room feels different this time of year. The noise is gone. No shouting of weights, no groaning oxen, no rustle of straw sacks being dragged across the floor. Instead, paper rustling, soft brush strokes, a slow ticking of the water clock in the corner. Your task is no longer collection, it is conclusion. The key. Final ledgers must be reviewed. Totals checked. Corrections noted. Margins labeled clearly for the inspectors from the domain office in Edo who will arrive after New Year. You open one of the largest scrolls, the year's full register of tax. Contributions by village. Each line is a name, a figure, a footnote. Kitamura, fulfilled in full. Minami Shinden, shortfall of 2.5 koku verified. Hoshikawa, deferred, pending appeal. There are no embellishments, no flourishes, just quiet facts written in careful strokes of black on the pale rice paper. You pause at a particular name, a village that gave slightly more than expected, not by mistake, not by compulsion, but by choice. They had a strong harvest and chose to contribute more, knowing others nearby had suffered from drought. There was no reward for this, no special favor, but you remember writing the entry. Overage of 3 koku, to be held in emergency reserve. You remember the village headman's face, lined and sun-warmed when he delivered the extra rice. He simply said, "Others may need it later." You made no comment at the time, you simply recorded it. But now you linger on the line just a moment longer. There's a different kind of record-keeping in that decision, one the ink cannot quite capture. The assistant enters quietly. He carries the pest log. You review it. 10 sacks lost to rot. 4 to rats, 1 to theft. Though the guard insists it was a miscount, you say nothing. These things happen. The paper used for this log is rougher, more utilitarian, but it still matters. Even the loss must be recorded. You add the figures to the margin. Year-end loss, 1.8 koku, within accepted threshold. Then you fold the page and tie it with red thread. Another chapter closed. Later, the overseer brings you a bundle of unused ledger pages from earlier in the year. They are to be burned. You pause. The paper is blank, pristine, full of potential. But unused pages have no place in official archives. They might be confused for missing records later. You carry them to the small brazier outside and feed them gently into the flames. One by one. The fire is warm on your fingers, and as the paper curls and blackens, you reflect, not on what was written, but on what could have been, the ledgers you never filled, the names you never added, the harvests that never came. Inside, you begin preparing the official year-end report. It must include total rice collected by village, all deductions and deferrals, losses due to spoilage, pests, theft, total volume distributed to samurai, temple and emergency stores, notes on irregularities. You write with steady hand. You use your best brush. You mark the front page with the domain seal, a crisp red circle pressed into the fibers of the cover sheet. You dry it carefully by the brazier. Then you wrap the scroll in silk, tie it with cord and place it into the lacquered chest reserved for official dispatch. It will leave by courier next week, weather permitting. The sun sets early in winter. Outside, the snow has deepened. The road is white and silent. The watchtower bell rings 5 slow times. You remain seated a little longer. The ledgers are now closed. The inkstone is rinsed. The last of the year's records have been tied, sealed, and stored in the chest beside your mat. You've spent your life in this room. You've watched the seasons turn through this very window. You've felt the warmth of the harvest months and the cold of their absence. You've measured the year in grains and losses, numbers and names. But tonight, for just a moment, you allow yourself a different thought. Not a calculation, not a note. Just a feeling of stillness, of weight, of the quiet dignity in recording the lives of others, not loudly, not famously, but faithfully. Because you know, without the record, the rice disappears. The names fade, the years blur, but with the brush stroke, some part of it remains, even if no one ever reads it again. And so you ask yourself as you close the final ledger of the year, was it the rice that sustained the nation, or the quiet rhythm of the brush that made it matter? It begins with a small door, barely taller than a child. Set into a crumbling alley wall in the southern quarter of Hangzhou, Just beyond the reach of the main market, the door opens into a low room filled with steam. Not from cooking pots or smoke, but from water boiled over coals, poured again and again into fine clay pots, sending fragrant clouds upward to meet the rafters. You are inside an illegal tea house. It is the year 1457. Ming China is at the height of its grandeur. Porcelain ships, towering palaces, sprawling cities filled with silken scholars. Tea is not only legal, it is sacred. The emperor drinks it at dawn, in moon-shaped cups imported from Jingdezhen. Monks use it to focus during long meditation. Merchants gift it in tight, fragrant bricks, sealed with wax and stamped with red ink. But this tea, the tea served here, is not taxed, and that makes it dangerous. The room is quiet. 5 people sit cross-legged at low tables. A single lantern swings gently from the ceiling. Shadows ripple across the worn wood walls. A woman in a grey robe moves from table to table, her steps silent. She carries a kettle with a twisted brass handle and pours without speaking. No one thanks her. She expects no words. This is not a place of chatter. It is a place of pause. The air smells like toasted rice, jasmine, and a hint of damp stone. You sip slowly from your cup. The flavor is deep, earthy, delicate, with a slight bitterness at the end. This is not the tea of officials, not the green leaves dried in palace gardens or the yellow buds wrapped in silk. This is wild-picked oolong from the hills above Fujian. Grown in shade, smuggled by moonlight, sold by the handful. The woman behind the counter, her name is Yao, runs this place alone. She is neither wealthy nor noble, but she is skilled. She knows how to boil water just below boiling. She knows which leaves to steep longer, which cups retain heat best. She roasts her own tea, presses her own bricks, blends her own scents. She accepts coin but prefers trade. Bundles of thread, waxed writing paper, dried tangerine peel. The laws against unlicensed tea houses are clear. Only authorized vendors may sell tea. Only registered families may roast and blend it. Only designated. Officials may transport it across provinces. Any violation is punishable by fine. Repeated offenses by imprisonment. But Yao continues. Quietly, patiently, carefully. Why? Because this house, this room, offers something more than tea. It offers space. For women mostly. For widows who live with brothers-in-law and need an hour alone. For seamstresses whose fingers are stiff from dawn weaving. For girls who cannot read but still dream. And sometimes for men too, older, slower, curious. They do not come for ceremony. There are no calligraphy scrolls, no poetry recitations, no incense, no ranks or robes or rules, only steam and silence and a small ceramic cup placed gently before you. You notice how Yao watches each guest, not suspiciously, but attentively. She can tell who needs quiet and who needs warmth. She can read shoulders, posture, breathing. If someone is troubled, she adds a slice of ginger to the cup. If someone lingers, too long in their own thoughts, she brings a second kettle spiced with clove and citrus peel. She is not a healer, not officially, but over time, word has spread. No signs mark the building. No names are spoken aloud. But in corners of the market, women whisper, "Try the one near the moon gate. Grey robe, 3 taps on the door." And so they come, at dawn, at dusk, in slippers, in silence, in need. Some bring small troubles, a quarrel at home, a poor harvest. Some bring none at all, only the need to sit, to be unspoken to be unjudged. Yao never writes anything down. She keeps no register. She knows that records bring risk. The local constables already suspect her. Twice they've searched the alley. Once they knocked. She answered with a bowl of rice and denied everything. No customers were inside. Only the kettle steaming on the hearth. She had wiped the table clean. The tea house, like so many others across the empire, survives on the edge. It is not loud. It is not grand. It is not meant to last. And yet, some of these places continue. For decades, they pass from mother to daughter, from widow to widow. They are hidden in back rooms, behind tailor shops, above storage lofts, beneath garden sheds. They survive because they are needed. Not just for tea, but for quiet. In a world of noise, rank, and surveillance, a warm cup placed in silence is a kind of resistance. As you finish your tea, you leave 3 coins beneath the bowl and bow slightly to Yao. She does not speak. She only nods. Outside, the snow has begun to fall. The alley is empty. You step through the door and it closes behind you with a sound as soft as breath. The world returns, but for a moment you had a place, and you wonder, in a world ruled by laws and scrolls, what power still lingers in a place where nothing is written, but everything is noticed? The snow has stopped. A pale sun now leans across the tiled rooftops of the southern quarter, melting patches of frost and revealing the slow footprints of the morning's first visitors. You follow the path back to the small alley, the one with the bowed door, the soot-dark walls, and the barely visible mark above the threshold. 3 vertical scratches in the wood, like a character that was started but never finished. Inside, it's the same. The air is warm with steam. The coals crackle quietly beneath the iron kettle. The scent today is different, not jasmine or rice, but something sharper, apricot leaf and dried goji. Yao is already working. She moves like she has every morning for 20 years, calm, deliberate, listening without seeming to. You are not the first to arrive. 2 women sit across from one another, not speaking. One gently massages her own wrist. The other stares into her cup as if trying to remember something she forgot. A 3rd guest enters as you settle in. She's young, barely more than a girl, and her hands tremble slightly as she removes her shawl. Yao greets her with a small nod and a bowl of warm water to rinse her fingers before she's even said a word. This is not hospitality. It is understanding. Today's tea is bitter. You taste it before you expect to. It bites slightly, then eases into something smoother. It clears the mind. You suspect it's made with old leaves, aged poor perhaps, stored in clay for years. This is not a flavor chosen for delight. It's chosen for clarity. A woman at the back table breaks the silence. She says quietly, "He was kind until winter." No one responds. She doesn't expect them to. She only needed the words to exist somewhere other than her chest. Yao brings her a 2nd cup, this one darker. She doesn't ask. She doesn't need to. That is the difference between this tea house and others. Elsewhere, tea is theatre, poetry, porcelain, slow pours over carved stones. Here, tea is medicine, for grief, for uncertainty, for women who are not allowed to be loud anywhere else. You once asked Yao months ago why she never left, never married, never closed the door and simply walked away. She had smiled, not wide, just a flicker, and said, "I did once, and then I came back." That was all. You haven't asked since. Later in the afternoon, Yao carefully sifts ash from beneath the kettle. She saves the cleanest bits in a small jar. "Ash for soaking cloth," she says. "It lifts oil stains. Better than soap." Another woman asks for a pinch. She's a laundress. Yao offers it with no charge. They exchange glances and nothing else. Nearby, a child waits outside the door. Not to enter, just to hold the hand of someone inside. He wears a ragged tunic, patched at the shoulder. He's been taught not to knock. He will wait as long as needed. Inside, his mother takes one last sip, then wraps her scarf, bows to Yao and slips past the curtain. Her fingers brush the child's forehead. He doesn't speak. Neither does she. There are dozens of places like this across the city. You've heard rumors. One near the river sells nothing but rosehip and silence. Another above a broom shop in the northern quarter offers sour plum and advice on how to hide. Bruises. They are not coordinated. They are not political. They are not legal, but they are connected. By gesture, by glance, by a shared knowledge of what it means to need space without explanation. At times, the government sends out patrols. They shut one down, arrest the owner, post a notice, but others remain. The secret is never in the tea. It's in the way it's offered. Before you leave, Yao gives you a folded square of cloth. You open it later, back in your own room. Inside is a small sachet of dried herbs, chamomile, chrysanthemum, and something else you don't recognize. There's a scrap of paper tucked inside with just 3 brushstrokes. For breathing. You don't ask how she knew. Outside, the sun lowers again behind the merchant rooftops. The alley narrows as you walk away, and the scent of apricot leaves lingers in your sleeves. You think of all the teacups placed today, poured with no words, served without prices, emptied with quiet hands. And you wonder, in a city of scrolls, decrees, and temples, how many of the truest acts of care happen quietly in rooms the law never enters. It is just past dusk now. The lantern outside the tea house has been unlit for over an hour, but the door remains cracked, the steam still drifting softly from within. You step through quietly as you always do, brushing snow from your sleeves before ducking inside. Tonight, the room is nearly empty. Only one other guest remains, a grandmother, it seems, who sits with her back to the wall, her eyes closed, her tea untouched. She's not asleep, just resting in a place where no one will ask anything of her. The fire glows low beneath the kettle. The coals pop now and then, and Yao. She is sitting for once, not pouring, not preparing. Just sitting on the floor with her knees tucked beneath her, sipping from her own bowl. The quiet is deeper than usual. It has weight. She sees you, and nods, not out of obligation, but recognition. You've been here long enough to know that no tea will be poured tonight unless asked for. So you sit without a word. The room holds you both in its silence. On the far wall, a crack has appeared in the plaster. You hadn't noticed it before. It runs from floor to ceiling, thin and grey like an ink line drawn by a tired hand. It doesn't look urgent, just inevitable. The sort of thing that happens to places that are used too long without anyone meaning to. You think for a moment of all that's happened here, all that's not written. No ledgers, no lists, no names on scrolls. But memory lives in the fabric of the room. The slightly warped floorboard where a girl once dropped a cup and cried. The polished edge of the counter where Yao always rests her elbow when she's thinking. The soft smudge on the wall from 1,000 quiet shoulders leaning year after year into stillness. None of this will be recorded. And maybe that's the point. Yao speaks, finally. Only one sentence. I will close after the new moon. You don't. Respond right away. She doesn't expect you to. You let the words settle like tea leaves at the bottom of a bowl. She continues, barely above a whisper. It's time. The wall's cracking. The constable came yesterday. He didn't knock, but he walked slower than usual. That's a warning. Her fingers turned the cup slowly in her lap. And the girl who comes for rosehip tea, she moved to Suzhou. There's no bitterness in her voice, only softness, like someone remembering a letter already burned. You don't ask what she'll do. You know she won't say. She might go to another district. She might stop entirely. She might disappear into the very silence she's always offered others. That, too, is her choice. And besides, this place was never permanent. It was never meant to last decades. It was never meant to become known. It was a place that filled a need for as long as the need was there, and now the need is changing. Later that week, you return one final time. The lantern is gone, the door is closed, but someone, Yao perhaps, has left 3 small teacups on the stone outside the threshold, upside down, clean, empty. You don't knock. You don't go in. You just stand there for a while, hands in your sleeves, letting the memory steep a little longer, and then you walk away. That alley, in time, will become something else. A storehouse, a storage loft, a tailor's back room. Eventually, a forgotten structure swept away for something modern, but those who drank there, sat there, breathed there, will remember, not for what was served, but for what was made possible. A moment, a space, a quiet that held something precious. Something illegal, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't written down. And you wonder, as you disappear back into the city's noise, how many rooms like that still exist, just out of sight, just out of law, offering the kind of peace no emperor could ever decree. They don't tell you much about how soldiers sleep. You hear of battles, of victories, of lines drawn and redrawn, of heroes, of casualties. But rarely, so rarely, do the scrolls or the speeches or the songs pause to describe what happens when the noise stops, when the sword is sheathed, when the campfire flickers low and all that's left is cold earth and quiet breath. And yet, Sleep is the one thing every army has in common, whether Roman or Greek, medieval or modern. Every soldier at some point must lie down, must close their eyes, must surrender to exhaustion, even if only for an hour. And it is there, on the ground, beside comrades, beneath stars or storm clouds, that the truest, quietest part of history unfolds. You begin in ancient Sparta, not in the heat of war, but in the dust of camp. A line of men sleep side by side, cloaks pulled tightly around their bodies. The chlamys, a thick woolen garment, serves not just as clothing but as blanket, cushion, and barrier from the ground. The earth is hard. There is no tent. Spartans are trained to rest anywhere, on anything. Their spears lie beside them. Always. 1. Hand grips the shaft even in sleep, just in case. They do not snore, they do not talk. They rest in shifts, some lying, some watching. Every few hours they switch. Nearby, the embers of a cook fire glow beneath a clay pot. Its contents are simple: barley porridge, charred meat, the remains of a long-ago supper, now hardened with ash. A lone soldier turns in his sleep, muttering, something half-formed, half-remembered. There are no pillows here. No beds, only the reassurance of routine. And silence. Now, Rome. The castra, the Roman military camp, is better organized. There are tents arranged in grids, leather stretched over wooden frames, straw mats on the ground, thick woolen cloaks, layered beneath. Soldiers sleep 8 to a tent, a contubernium they call it, a unit not just of battle, but of rest. They eat together, march together, sleep side by side. There is a rotation for guard duty. Watches are kept by water clocks. The night is divided into 4 parts, each 2 to 3 hours long. Men wake silently, take their turn at the perimeter, then return to sleep without a word. Sometimes they dream of home, a vineyard, a river, a woman's laugh, but most often they simply don't remember. Sleep comes heavy and fast. The tent is filled with breath and body heat, the sounds of movement, even in stillness. One man sleeps with a lucky charm around his neck, an iron ring from his father. Another tucks a small wooden carving into the fold of his tunic. A dog sleeps outside. The tent flap. No one feeds it, but it stays. It knows safety lives here for now. Move forward in time. A knight lies in his tent during a lull in the 100 Years' War. His armor rests against a wooden frame. His squire sleeps at the entrance. They share a blanket sewn with patches, symbols, saints' crests. The knight prays before sleep, not for victory, but for rest. His hands are stiff. His back aches. The ground beneath him is softer than usual, layered with pine boughs. It smells like resin and damp wool. Somewhere in the distance, a bard's lute plays faintly. Perhaps a fire crackles. Perhaps only memory crackles. He sleeps in pieces, 20 minutes here, a full hour there. He never truly lets go. He cannot afford to. The setting shifts again. It is 1916, the Somme. A British soldier huddles in a trench, dug through mud and bone. There is no tent, no straw, just a blanket made from a burlap sack. His boots are still on. He cannot take them off, his feet are soaked. His toes burn with cold. The dampness never leaves. He curls into the corner of the trench, using his pack as a pillow. It holds letters from home. A tin spoon. A worn photograph of someone's face, her features smudged from rain. A comrade leans against him, not from affection but from necessity. Body heat, human shape, reminder of existence. There is no night here, only shifts of grey. A whistle might blow at any moment, a shell might fall, but until then, they sleep. Upright, half-seated, half-aware. Sleep in war becomes an act of rebellion. Against fear, against duty, against the body's own refusal. You see it now across ages, across languages, across empires. Every soldier's sleep is stolen. A borrowed hour beneath a tree, a doze at the edge of a fire, a shared blanket in a barn with chickens. Rustling overhead. It is never enough, it is never safe, but it is essential, because the body cannot march or fight or stand unless it first rests. And in those resting hours, brief, silent, unseen, History pauses, swords dull, hearts slow, thoughts float, and for a few moments in the middle of war, there is peace, and you wonder, when the drums fade and the banners fall, is it the battle that's remembered, or the sleep that came after when a soldier first laid down his shield and let his breath slow? They don't tell you much about how soldiers sleep. You hear of battles, of victories, of lines drawn and redrawn, of heroes, of casualties. But rarely, so rarely, do the scrolls or the speeches or the songs pause to describe what happens when the noise stops, when the sword is sheathed, when the campfire flickers low and all that's left is cold earth and quiet breath. And yet, sleep is the one thing every army has in common, whether Roman or Greek, medieval or modern. Every soldier at some point must lie down, must close their eyes, must surrender to exhaustion, even if only for an hour. And it is there, on the ground, beside comrades, beneath stars or storm clouds, that the truest, quietest part of history unfolds. You begin in ancient Sparta, not in the heat of war, but in the dust of camp. A line of men sleep side by side, cloaks pulled tightly around their bodies. The chlamys, a thick woolen garment, serves not just as clothing but as blanket, cushion, and barrier from the ground. The earth is hard. There is no tent. Spartans are trained to rest anywhere, on anything. Their spears lie beside them. Always. 1. Hand grips the shaft even in sleep, just in case. They do not snore, they do not talk. They rest in shifts, some lying, some watching. Every few hours they switch. Nearby, the embers of a cook fire glow beneath a clay pot. Its contents are simple: barley porridge, charred meat, the remains of a long-ago supper, now hardened with ash. A lone soldier turns in his sleep, muttering, something half-formed, half-remembered. There are no pillows here. No beds, only the reassurance of routine. And silence. Now, Rome. The castra, the Roman military camp, is better organized. There are tents arranged in grids, leather stretched over wooden frames, straw mats on the ground, thick woolen cloaks, layered beneath. Soldiers sleep 8 to a tent, a contubernium they call it, a unit not just of battle, but of rest. They eat together, march together, sleep side by side. There is a rotation for guard duty. Watches are kept by water clocks. The night is divided into 4 parts, each 2 to 3 hours long. Men wake silently, take their turn at the perimeter, then return to sleep without a word. Sometimes they dream of home, a vineyard, a river, a woman's laugh, but most often they simply don't remember. Sleep comes heavy and fast. The tent is filled with breath and body heat, the sounds of movement, even in stillness. One man sleeps with a lucky charm around his neck, an iron ring from his father. Another tucks a small wooden carving into the fold of his tunic. A dog sleeps outside. The tent flap. No one feeds it, but it stays. It knows safety lives here for now. Move forward in time. A knight lies in his tent during a lull in the 100 Years' War. His armor rests against a wooden frame. His squire sleeps at the entrance. They share a blanket sewn with patches, symbols, saints' crests. The knight prays before sleep, not for victory, but for rest. His hands are stiff. His back aches. The ground beneath him is softer than usual, layered with pine boughs. It smells like resin and damp wool. Somewhere in the distance, a bard's lute plays faintly. Perhaps a fire crackles. Perhaps only memory crackles. He sleeps in pieces, 20 minutes here, a full hour there. He never truly lets go. He cannot afford to. The setting shifts again. It is 1916, the Somme. A British soldier huddles in a trench, dug through mud and bone. There is no tent, no straw, just a blanket made from a burlap sack. His boots are still on. He cannot take them off, his feet are soaked. His toes burn with cold. The dampness never leaves. He curls into the corner of the trench, using his pack as a pillow. It holds letters from home. A tin spoon. A worn photograph of someone's face, her features smudged from rain. A comrade leans against him, not from affection but from necessity. Body heat, human shape, reminder of existence. There is no night here, only shifts of grey. A whistle might blow at any moment. A shell might fall, but until then they sleep, upright, half-seated, half-aware. The war is over, whichever war it was. Ancient or modern, remembered or forgotten, it has ended. The flags are lowered. The orders cease. The swords rust. The boots sit silent in corners. And yet, in the corners of old houses, in the pages of worn letters, and in the memories of those who survived, there remains one small undramatic truth. The soldier finally slept. You are standing now in a wooden barracks, long after the sounds of rifles have faded. The walls are lined with narrow cots, each one covered by a blanket. Grey, coarse, standard issue. The pillow is thin. The mattress stuffed with straw or old wool, lumpy from use. In this room there is no noise, only breathing. You move quietly, as if not to disturb the sleepers, though they are not there anymore. The beds are made. The footlockers are closed. But you can feel the presence of what once was, the aching silence of men who at last had nothing more to do but rest. On the small table in the center of the room is a note, left behind in soft pencil. I will sleep until someone wakes me. Please don't knock unless you bring bread or peace. It is unsigned, it does not need to be. History rarely records what time the soldiers went to bed. There are no statues of someone dozing on a shield. No scrolls filled with the sound of snoring in a trench. But sleep was always there, in the lull between the march and the next command, in the hours stolen in barns, in forests, in bombed-out churches, sometimes just 10 minutes behind a wall, forehead, against the barrel of a rifle, sometimes 3 full hours under a borrowed blanket in a house that smelled faintly of tea. Sleep came in patches, in shifts, in mercy. And when peace came, it arrived not with fanfare, but with stillness. The first night home. The first night without boots, without listening for hoofbeats or the pop of gunpowder. That first real sleep, deep, uninterrupted, was not always immediate. Some could not sleep at all. Too used to flinching, too trained to wait for the whistle or the yell or the flare. But eventually the body found the quiet again, and that was its own kind of victory. A letter from 1919 found folded in a coat pocket reads, "The war ended and I slept for 12 hours straight. Woke up still tired. But no dreams this time. Just black. Just warmth. Just the pillow I thought I'd forgotten how to use." Another, from a Napoleonic officer, describes, "It was the sleep of an old tree deep into the roots. My mind was empty, and I thanked God for the emptiness." And one more. Anonymous, scrawled in the margin of a ration log, says only, "I dreamed I was a boy again, fishing, and no one shouted." After peace, the soldier does not always return to a parade. Sometimes he returns to a stool in a workshop, or a patch of field needing seed, or a porch with a dog too old to jump up anymore. But always at some point he returns to his bed, a real bed. 4 legs, a mattress, a quilt, and that first night, alone, safe, dry, is sacred, not because it is beautiful, but because it is unremarkable, because he is not needed, because the war no longer owns his hours. You sit now in one such room. A candle flickers, low beside a journal left open on the table. No bloodstains, no medals, just a list of dreams remembered, scribbled in half-sleep. Field of poppies. Smell of bread. Someone's hand on my shoulder. Couldn't see who. No noise. The wax drips quietly. The pen lies sideways. Outside the wind moves through leaves. No alarms. No footsteps. Just breath. And perhaps now, you begin to understand what was really being fought for. Not the territory, not the glory, not even the cause, but the right to stop, to sleep without fear, to wake to the sound of birds and not bullets. To be, once again, a man in a bed. Not a body in the mud. So the next time history tells you of victory, ask what the soldier did the night after. Ask whether he found his way to a warm floor, a folded blanket, a pillow, and a dream that was finally quiet. Because maybe the real peace began not with a treaty, but with the first night when no one had to take the final watch. You wake before the sun, the inn is still dark. The coals from last night's fire have long since cooled, and the straw mat beneath you crackles faintly as you shift. Outside, the air smells of river mist and damp pine. The only other sound is the slow creak of an ox cart rolling down the Kai main road. You are a census taker for the Han Empire, and today, like many others before it, you will count. The year is 2 CE. The Han dynasty stretches across mountains, valleys, deserts, and forests. It is vast, and it wants to know who lives within it, not for philosophy, but for rice and labor and war, every household, every name, every son of working age, every bushel of millet harvested, every field sown. Every corner of the empire is to be measured, recorded, understood. That is your task. But there is no office, no ink-stamped forms, no tablets or typewriters, only your feet, your memory, and the weight of the scrolls in your bag. You wrap your tunic tight, tie your straw hat beneath your chin, and step onto the road. Your writing kit hangs from your belt, a narrow bamboo case filled with brush, inkstone, a cloth rag, and lengths of thin wooden slips for field notes. The official scrolls stay rolled and sealed. You don't risk writing directly onto them until you're back in the district office under a dry roof with tea and silence and time. Today, you'll walk to a village 3 li beyond the river bend. You've been before, but that was 2 winters. Vargo the elder has since died. His son now leads. The household numbers have likely changed, babies born, sons married, elders passed on. The rhythm of life, logged 1 mark at a time. You arrive just after the morning meal. The village is small. Smoke curls from thatched rooftops. A dog barks once, then lies back down. Chickens dart between carts. Children peek. From behind trees, whispering at your government-issue robe and the shiny bronze seal on your waist sash. The village head greets you with a shallow bow. You return it, unsmiling but polite. This is your 3rd district this month. Your sandals are worn through. Your brush hand is stiff. You carry no authority beyond your records, but still, people treat you with a quiet mix of fear and formality, because you are writing them down, and what's written can be taxed. You sit beneath a mulberry tree. The headman unrolls his own notes, tallies kept in charcoal on a smooth plank of wood. You cross-reference 17 households. 6 boys aged 15-21, 4 men conscripted last autumn. 3 empty homes, migration due to floods. You nod. You've heard of those floods. 2 more villages downstream were wiped out. You make a note, not just of the loss, but of the risk. The empire does not like instability, but it prefers to know about it in advance. A young girl brings you a cup of water. You bow your head in thanks. She watches you as you work. You write vertically from top to bottom. Your brush moves slowly, carefully. 1 stroke too thick, and the character for child becomes cow. Your ink must dry fully before you roll the slip and tuck it away. No one speaks unless asked. This is a practiced dance. The census is not a conversation. It is a transaction of presence. You exist. You are counted. You are seen. You finish before midday. You eat a small handful of rice and dried plum in the shade, sharing the mat with the headman. You don't talk about politics, or court scandals, or border unrest, only farming. He tells you the millet was late this year, that his wife is weaving a funeral robe for a neighbor, that the local temple's incense stocks are nearly gone. You nod. These things matter, not because they affect numbers, but because they affect people, and people are what the numbers are made of. You thank him. He bows. You shoulder your bag. Before you leave, the oldest villager shuffles forward. He places a small peach in your hand, slightly bruised but sweet-smelling. No words, just a peach. You accept it with your left hand, the respectful one, and bow slightly deeper than usual. Then you walk back to the road, toward the next hamlet. Another tally, another set of names to carry. You wonder as you walk how many people know what happens to the scrolls you write. They're filed, of course. They're read by ministers, copied, summarized, sent by courier to the capital. From those numbers, the court determines how much rice to collect, how many conscripts to demand, how much land to redistribute. And yet the names, the people you remember, so often vanish into the system, not out of cruelty, just size. The empire is large. It forgets easily. But you don't. You remember the girl with the ink-stained fingers, the family who offered you ginger broth when you had a cough, the boy who asked quietly if writing was hard. You didn't answer. You just let him watch you form the next character with care. And now, as the sky darkens and the stars begin to thread through the clouds, you arrive at your resting place, a roadside shelter with an oil lamp and a bamboo mat. You roll out your notes, you smooth the slips, you sharpen your brush, and you begin to write. Because in this quiet job, on the edge of the empire, your brush is the bridge between the living and the forgotten, between the household and the state, between the face, chrome, and the figure. The lamp burns low. It is well past dusk now, and you are seated cross-legged inside a tiny roadside shelter, its walls made of woven reed and patched cloth. The air outside is cold, but inside the flame of the oil lamp gives just enough warmth to keep the ink from freezing. You dip your brush again, slowly, precisely, and mark one more household complete. The tally is simple. 3 adults, 1 child, 1 ox, 2 hens. No father listed. Widow with weaving income, no recent migration. You pause not for any official reason, but because your wrist aches, not from injury but repetition. You've written nearly 200 entries this season, each one carved, then to a thin strip of bamboo. Each one dried, bundled, labeled with a silk tag tied in a specific knot you were trained to tie without thought. And now, after days on the road, alone but surrounded by the Empire's endless breath, the silence is a kind of reward. The scrolls sleep better than you do. They're lined up in a neat bundle beside your bedding, wrapped in oil-treated cloth, protected from weather, and rolled with your personal stamp on each header. If you drop one, you'll have to redo it. If it smears, it might be refused at the district office. If you make a single error in the village name, the entire household might be counted twice, or not at all, so you take your time. And still, mistakes happen. You remember one, last spring. You'd written the character for 6, too much like 5. The clerk caught it, quietly, kindly, but his eyes lingered longer than they needed to. You didn't forget the look. You rewrote the entire strip. There's something strange, you've come to realize, about counting people for a living. Most see it as cold, but it isn't. You remember things the Empire will never see. The child who answered the door barefoot in frost, the man who could no longer speak. So his daughter wrote their answers on a flat stone and held it up, one phrase at a time. The grandmother who insisted you sit and drink barley tea and pressed a coin into your palm to bribe your brush into being kind. You never took the coin, but you kept it, folded in your robe's lining next to a sprig of dried plum blossom. Not for luck, just for memory. In the shelter tonight, you eat slowly. Rice steamed earlier in the day, packed into a gourd and wrapped in cloth. It's dry now. You chew in silence. There's a letter in your pack written by your cousin in Luoyang. He works in the Ministry of Justice, a fine position, indoor work. He writes in ink finer than yours and speaks of scrolls you'll never see. He ends the letter as always. Come back to the city. There's no honor in counting huts. You never reply. Not because he's wrong, but because you're not sure he understands what you see. After the meal, you light a second wick in the lamp, and from your sleeve you retrieve something unofficial, a separate scroll, not for the court, not for the ministry, but for yourself. It is your memory roll, a list of names, moments, and impressions that the official census can't hold. Girl in willow pattern robe, missing 2 front teeth, wanted to know if the emperor has a beard. Old man with walking stick carved like a snake, asked to be counted last, said he was slower than most. Newborn unnamed, held in a scarf, slept through my questions. This scroll will never be stamped. It is not law. It is not useful. But it is true. You lie down finally, wrapping yourself in a worn wool cloak, the brush still warm in your hand. Tomorrow you'll reach the lakeside villages. You'll ask about their fishing quotas, their boats, their sons. You'll record marriages, deaths, and disputes about irrigation ditches. But tonight, as the wind moves softly across the reeds, outside you close your eyes and whisper one name from the scroll. Just one, just to keep it real. And you wonder, if the emperor himself ever reads your reports, will he imagine the faces? Or will they remain forever just characters on bamboo? You've returned to the district office, after 42 days on foot, after counting 2,137 people across 81 villages, after walking hills carved by rice terraces and paths still wet from floodwater. Now at last your feet rest on smooth stone. The building is quiet in the mornings, just the murmur of recorders shuffling slips and the faint rustle of robes as clerks pass in soft sandals. The scent of aged paper and ink clings to the beams. A clerk with a drooping mustache nods to you as you step inside. You carry your satchel to the registrar. He does not speak. You bow, set the scrolls on the table, and unroll the bundles. Everything must be reviewed. Every line, every seal, every mark. He checks them all. You sit on a low bench, waiting, eyes half closed. You can hear sparrows chirping from the rafters. You know you'll be here a long time. That's how it always is. Accuracy takes patience. As you wait, you think back to a boy you counted last week. Barely 10. He sat cross-legged by the door while you spoke with his mother. When you asked her the household total, he whispered the answer before she could, correctly. Later,